Malik Johnson began his first day at Meridian Logistics with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He had graduated top of his class at State Tech University with a degree in supply chain management, and after 6 months of scouring job boards, interviews, and networking events, he finally secured a position as a logistics coordinator at Meridian's Regional Distribution Center in Greenville. The company's website touted a supportive, inclusive culture and steady upward mobility for high performers. For Malik, whose parents had emigrated from Nigeria and worked long hours at convenience stores to support his education, this job represented more than a paycheck. It was a validation of his years of effort and sacrifice. As he stepped out of his car into the gravel lot that morning, he squared his shoulders, smoothing the maroon tie over his crisp white shirt. He breathed in the cool October air, acutely aware that he was one of only a handful of black employees in a workforce that was predominantly white and male. Still, he reminded himself that his college mentors had prepared him to succeed, even when he felt out of place. He clutched his leather satchel and headed toward the side entrance of the warehouse, determined to make a good first impression. Meridian's facility was a sprawling structure of galvanized steel and concrete, humming with forklifts and the echo of pallets clicking on the polished floor. As he walked past rows of stacked crates labeled Fragile, Handle with Care, and Priority, Next Day Delivery, he felt a surge of anticipation. His position would entail coordinating shipments, analyzing inventory data, and designing workflow improvements. It was exactly the kind of role he had studied for. He stopped briefly at the reception desk, where a young woman with a name tag reading Stephanie offered a polite nod. "You must be Malik Johnson," she said, scanning her clipboard. She guided him to an office labeled Logistics Manager, where he met his supervisor, a man named Thomas Blake. Blake, early 50s, wore a starched dress shirt and channeled corporate polish. He extended a hand, which Malik noticed was cool and firm. "Welcome to Meridian, Malik," Blake said, smiling thinly but without warmth. "Glad to have you. Let me show you to your workstation." The tour was brief. A cubicle outfitted with a desktop computer, dual monitors, and a sticky note stuck to the edge of the right monitor that read, "Get it right, get it now." Malik suppressed the urge to wince. As Blake walked away to attend another meeting, Malik settled in, booting up the computer and scanning the desktop for orientation files. He knew that beyond merely fulfilling his job description, he'd have to navigate subtle tensions in the workplace. But he was determined to prove that he was more than capable of adding value here. Over the next 2 weeks, Malik threw himself into learning the proprietary logistics software Meridian used, attending safety training sessions, and shadowing other coordinators. He arrived each day at 7:30 a.m. and stayed until at least 6 p.m., taking copious notes and volunteering for extra tasks whenever possible. During shift change, he watched seasoned operators communicate in rapid-fire jargon, picking, packing, RF scanners, cycle counts, and he memorized those phrases. He greeted every coworker he saw, from the line supervisors to the shipping clerks, with a nod and occasional "good morning." Yet he sensed a subtle wariness in the air. During break times in the small break room, he'd make polite conversation, asking one forklift operator about auction prices for used forklifts, or asking the packaging specialist for tips on crate labeling, but often got only one-word answers or polite smiles. It was not the overt hostility he had feared. Instead, it was the persistent chill of distance. He told himself it was a product of unfamiliarity, or perhaps a regional reticence. He reminded himself he would let his work speak for itself. Then came his first clash with Blake. On a Monday morning, about 3 weeks after he started, Blake popped his head into Malik's cubicle. "Johnson," Blake said briskly, his tone crisp, "I need you in my office." Malik followed him down a corridor to the manager's small windowless office. Blake shut the door. "I reviewed your preliminary reports. You're doing data entry fine, but your analysis is sloppy." He tapped a printed spreadsheet with a critical red circle around a projected cost per shipment figure. "I asked for the average cost across the last quarter, not the projected cost for next quarter." Malik glanced at the paper, then looked up. "I apologize, sir. I must have misread your instructions. I'll correct it right away." Blake's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Wait, I'm not done. Is your name Malik or Mike?" Malik paused, surprised by the question. "My name is Malik," he said. Blake's expression tightened. "It's just that I see on your badge you go by Malik J, but your email signature uses Mike. I'm trying to figure out if you went by Mike in your old life, and then switched to Malik here." He leaned forward. Then are you sure that's how we should refer to you? It's confusing. Maybe you'd be better off using Mike. It's more familiar, more acceptable. The insinuation stung. Malik clenched his jaw. Sir, my name is Malik. It's always been my name. Blake leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. We'll see. For now, keep the formal attention to detail. Let's get that report fixed. Malik nodded and stepped into the hallway, his heart pounding. Blinking back anger, he reminded himself that he had come to Meridian to succeed, not to fight. He walked to his desk, tightly gripped his pen, and corrected the spreadsheet without protest. But from that moment on, he noticed the way Blake's cold gaze followed him through the mornings. He also began catching colleagues referring to him as Mike when whispering behind his back. One afternoon, as he loaded pallets into his forklift to transport finished crates to the loading dock, he heard a line supervisor mutter to a coworker, "Watch out for Mike the malcontent. Doesn't even look like he belongs here." The words rattled him, but he squared his shoulders and reminded himself that he was here on merit. He would prove that his identity was not a liability. At home, Malik's roommate Terry, a fellow graduate who was working as a software developer, encouraged him to keep his head up. Don't let Blake's old-school racism get to you, Terry said over TV trays piled with takeout. Just let him watch you perform. He has no idea what you're capable of. Malik nodded, but secretly wondered whether complacent hard work would ever be enough. He hadn't expected outright bigotry, but the implicit message was clear. He was judged first for the color of his skin and the unfamiliar cadence of his name. Still, he resolved to remain patient and prove himself. A month into his tenure, a critical issue erupted. One evening, as Malik was about to leave, he noticed on his screen an automated alert, a major discrepancy between the inventory logged in the system and the physical count on the warehouse floor. The red flag indicated a shortfall of thousands of units of a new line of eco-friendly packaging materials destined for shipment to a major retail partner. If those orders were not fulfilled by morning, Meridian risked losing a substantial contract and incurring millions in penalty fees. The evening manager, a white supervisor named Harold, was already on the floor trying to reconcile the discrepancy. He waved at Malik, his face lined with worry. Johnson, can you come down here? We're missing cases. Seems like 7 pallet loads vanished from our system. Harold led him to the pallet's usual location near Dock 3, where, as expected, the crates were missing, but the system still showed them as stored. We've searched everywhere, Harold said flatly. No sign of them. Malik inhaled, scanned the open floor, then asked, which shifts handled these pallets? Harold pointed toward 2 security cameras mounted high on the rafters. Midnight to 8 a.m. swing. Went out at 7:15 a.m. No anomalies on tape, though. Malik's mind raced. He asked Harold to show him the last printed inventory log and the system report. He noticed that the system had incorrectly labeled the pallets as expunged rather than relocated due to a human error. The night shift's operator had hit the wrong function on the scanner. All 7 pallets had been moved to Dock 9, but never scanned back into the system properly. No malicious intent, just a misinterpretation of the scanner model's interface when a bright red banner flashed delete for confirmation. In panic, the night shift operator had pressed enter to cancel what he thought was a glitch. The result, the system flagged the crates as removed. Malik took a deep breath. Show me the scanner logs, he said to Harold, who handed him a printout of time-stamped entries. Malik quickly cross-referenced the timestamps with footage from the cameras on Dock 9. He spotted the operator's forklift maneuvering those exact pallets onto the wrong loading platform at 7:02 a.m. He sealed his lips and gathered his thoughts. They needed to get an accurate count into the system under Meridian's official rulebook, or risk a financial catastrophe. He grabbed a handheld RF scanner, ran it over the 8 crates, and watched as they reappeared on his tablet's inventory screen. He consulted the printed logs, adjusted the counts, and synced the system. At 8:45 p.m., he submitted a corrected report to regional headquarters and flagged the incident as a process error requiring retraining. Harold exhaled in relief. Johnson, I don't know how you did all that so fast. You saved our skins. The mid-level and upper-level guys were ready to go into crisis mode. Later that night, as Malik walked to his car, he knew the gravity of what he had achieved. He had prevented a catastrophic breach of contract and saved the company from a logistical meltdown. It was the kind of problem-solving that would have earned praise anywhere, except, perhaps, in Blake's office. The next morning, when Malik arrived at work, he was surprised to see a sleek sedan parked in front of the main entrance. A small cluster of employees hovered near the door, waiting anxiously. As he climbed out of his car, he heard a familiar voice call, "Hey, Mike, or Malik, right?" It was Harold giving him a deprecating wink. Malik offered a polite nod. Inside the lobby, the executive elevator doors opened to reveal a tall man in a dark suit. Roger Thompson, the regional vice president for operations, and two members of the corporate legal team. Thomas Blake walked up to Malik's cubicle that morning, cleared his throat, and said, "Johnson, CEO and VP, just called a meeting. Be in the conference room in 5 minutes." Malik's heart pounded. He shoved aside his spreadsheets, took a sip of water, and headed to the back of house conference room, where lights gleamed off the mahogany table and a projector hummed overhead. Roger Thompson spoke first. "We've just been briefed that last night, a major inventory discrepancy was resolved at the 11th hour. Thanks to a nimble analysis and quick thinking, the company avoided a slew of penalties and potential loss of our account with Green's Supermarkets. The team that investigated found the error was unintentional, a scanner glitch. But the corrective action was led by Malik Johnson, our new logistics coordinator. We'd like to formally recognize him." Thompson motioned to a legal counsel who placed an engraved plaque on the table. "Meridian Excellence Award for Outstanding Service in Crisis Resolution awarded to M. Johnson, 10/27/2023. There was polite applause around the room, though some faces remained stoic. Blake remained seated, arms folded. Thompson asked everyone to remain afterward for a brief discussion about process improvements. Then he said, "Malik, excellent work. My assistant will schedule a brief meeting to discuss how we can codify your solution into our standard operating procedure." He shook Malik's hand. "Congratulations." Malik nodded, cheeks warm. He returned to his cubicle, stunned that at least some of his efforts had not gone unnoticed. But Blake's response was muted. Late that morning, Blake summoned him to the office again. Malik braced himself. "I saw the award," Blake said curtly, staring at him across the desk. "Don't let it go to your head. You did your job. We all do our jobs. Now I expect you to deliver consistently." There was no gratitude in Blake's voice. Malik swallowed. "Yes, sir," he said, his voice steady. Blake leaned back. "Also, I don't appreciate you sticking to Malik when everyone calls you Mike. It's unprofessional. If you want to be respected here, you'll use the name they're familiar with." Malik's jaw tightened. "Sir, my name is Malik. That is how I wish to be addressed." Blake's face darkened. "We'll see how that goes. For now, get back to work." Malik left. His heart sank. But he reminded himself that the award and the VP's commendation mattered far more than Blake's petty demands. He was here to do a job, and he would not let a bigot's discomfort define him. Over the next few months, Malik's reputation soared among the warehouse staff and operations team. He began to lead training sessions for night shift operators on proper scanning techniques, reducing inventory discrepancies by 90%. He drafted a new workflow for cycle counts that saved 2 hours per week and prevented costly errors. He worked closely with Sasha, the IT liaison, to automate certain reports, freeing up supervisors' time. His colleagues started seeking his advice. "Hey, Malik, can you help me troubleshoot this manifest issue?" Or during lunch breaks, a line supervisor would wave him over. "Malik, do you have a moment to run a quick analysis on our packaging defect?" Rates? Even operators on the loading dock, once reserved, now smiled and teased him good-naturedly about green screen errors. Gradually, the warehouse bulletin board filled with handwritten notes of appreciation. "Thanks for showing me the new label printer shortcut. Great job fixing that cycle count glitch. Malik saved us again." It felt surreal. The same man whom Blake had belittled for his name was now in high demand. Blake, however, remained sullen. When a director from corporate came down for a site visit, Blake played host, touring him through the facility and bragging about certain seasoned coordinators as integral team members, but glossing over any mention of Malik. When pressed about a reduction in inventory discrepancies, Blake gave a vague answer about improved supervision. Yet corporate memos indicated praise for the Johnson process improvements. And eventually, internal promotions began to acknowledge Malik. Late one afternoon, he was called to meet with Blake and Harold, the evening manager. They sat at a small round table in the break room, where leftover muffins lay next to an empty pot of coffee. Blake cleared his throat. "Malik, Harold and I have reviewed your training materials and the improvements you made during that inventory crisis. We want you to run a training seminar for the entire operations team, both day and swing shifts, on best practices for digital inventory management and cycle count protocols. Harold nodded emphatically. You're the expert now. We want you to share your knowledge with everyone. Malik felt a surge of pride. I'd be honored, sir. Blake's face softened momentarily as he added, just make sure the seminar is concise but comprehensive. We need to keep this facility running smoothly. There was no mention of compensation or title change, but Malik knew that leading a site-wide seminar was a sign that his expertise was finally recognized. That evening, as the warehouse quieted, he prepared his lesson plan. He structured the seminar to begin with a story of the inventory crisis, framing it as a case study, how an unintentional data entry error can escalate into cost overruns and contractual penalties. He illustrated each step with screenshots of the proprietary software, highlighted scanner best practices, and devised role-playing exercises to allow attendees to practice cycle counts and data reconciliation. He printed handouts, one-page flowcharts, step-by-step scanner instructions, and tips for reducing human error. He also included a slide explaining how to address system prompts cautiously, to avoid accidentally hitting delete when the scanner asks for confirmation. He rehearsed his speech until late into the night, practicing transitions, timing, and potential Q&A questions. On the morning of the seminar, the warehouse floor buzzed with anticipation. Foreman posted a notice on the break room door. Seminar, Best Practices for Inventory Management, led by Malik Johnson, 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Workers trickled in, coffee in hand, and took seats at the long tables. Blake sat in the back, arms folded, observing. Malik stood before a whiteboard, wearing his signature blue button-up shirt and black slacks, his back straight, voice clear. He began, Good morning, everyone. I'm Malik Johnson, and today we're going to talk about how we can work together to eliminate inventory discrepancies and ensure we can deliver on our promises to customers. He scanned the room, faces ranging from young temp workers to seasoned forklift drivers. Some arms remained folded, some faces impassive. A few wore expressions of mild curiosity. He moved systematically through his slides, narrating with precision. First, let's discuss the proper way to scan an inbound pallet. Always confirm that the scanner's green light turns solid before moving on. If you see a red prompt asking, delete this entry, don't just cancel it in panic. Hit the back button to return to the proper menu. If you're unsure, mark the pallet and ask for clarification. He paused and pointed to a photo of a mislabeled crate. Mistakes like this one, where the operator accidentally keyed an incorrect SKU, led to over 200 missing units last quarter. When we run cycle counts more frequently, we catch these before they compound. He then launched into his case study. Last fall, we encountered a shortfall of 7 pallets worth $150,000 in product. Thanks to a quick cross-reference between scanner logs and camera footage, we resolved it in 2 hours, avoiding a breach of contract. But we cannot rely on luck. We need clear, standardized procedures to prevent it from happening again. He then introduced group exercises. He asked attendees to pair up and simulate scanning a mock pallet setup, practicing each menu navigation. As he circulated among the tables offering feedback, hold the scanner at a 45-degree angle, not flat. He noticed even the most skeptical warehouse veteran nodding in acknowledgement of the logic. He answered questions. What if the scanner's battery dies mid-scan? Swap it immediately. Never guess a count. How do I handle partial pallets? Always mark them as partial in the system and follow the partial pallet procedure, which ensures the system doesn't consider them as missing. The room's energy shifted. By the end of the 90-minute session, the break room was filled with applause. Workers looked at each other, murmuring, That makes sense, no more random scanning. Malik felt a rush of triumph that transcended personal vindication. He had given his colleagues a tangible toolkit for avoiding costly errors and making their individual jobs easier. Afterward, as he packed up his handouts, Blake approached him with a rare, faint smile. Johnson, I have to admit, you did a fine job today. I saw some positive feedback from the operations director, who suggested we roll out your training across all Meridian facilities in the Southeast region. We'll need your help on video tutorials and updates to the standard training manual. Malik nodded, pride glowing. He met Blake's gaze. Thank you, sir. I'm happy to help. Blake hesitated, then said in a slightly softer tone, And, if you prefer to go by Malik instead of Mike in these materials, I'll respect that. Just let me know. Malik's heart swelled. Thank you, he said sincerely. For the first time, He felt acknowledged as a person, not an inconvenience. Within weeks, videos of Malik's instructional segments, Malik Johnson's guides to scanner best practices, appeared on Meridian's intranet. Other facilities began reporting declines in inventory discrepancies, and the regional VP personally credited Malik's materials at a quarterly meeting. He was invited to sit on a task force to redesign Meridian's entire inventory management roadmap. Slowly, the rumor mill corrected itself. Hey, have you seen Johnson's training? Makes sense, doesn't it? When new hires started, they joined not intimidated by stale procedures, but energized by the clarity Malik's guides provided. The apprentices at the loading docks, younger men who had once looked at him skeptically, now waved when he passed, joking, "Malik's back. Let's get our scan right this time." The transformation was palpable. At home, each evening, Malik reflected on how far he had come. He shared dinner with Terry, who often teased him, "Mr. Head Trainer, huh? You run the show now." Malik laughed, grateful for the easy camaraderie. He occasionally received emails from HR. Effective next pay cycle, your title is Logistics Training Manager, with a 10% raise. He also found a letter in his mailbox. It was an official apology from Meridian's diversity office, acknowledging that the initial years of his tenure, including the disrespect around his name, were not reflective of the company's stated values. They invited him to serve on a new Diversity and Inclusion Council to prevent such experiences for future employees. He accepted, knowing that confronting systemic problems at a structural level was part of ensuring progress went beyond his personal fall from bias. He looked forward to shaping policies that honored people's backgrounds and identities. One spring afternoon, about a year after his first day, he walked the warehouse floor in his role as training manager, clipboard in hand. He stopped to watch a young black distribution specialist, maybe 18, diligently scanning crates using Malik's recommended approach. The specialist looked up, surprised by Malik's presence. "Manager Johnson?" he said shyly. Malik nodded. "Hey, that's the right way to do it. Keep it up." The young man beamed, inspired. Across the aisle, a group of white colleagues, seasoned women who once barely spoke to him, laughed as they shared tips on the next cycle count with him. In the far corner, Blake, now his colleague in the Diversity Council, approached. Blake smiled genuinely. "Malik, I wanted to thank you again for your leadership. I've learned a lot from you about standard operating procedures and about respecting every person's identity. I'm sorry for my earlier insensitivity." Malik shook his head. "We're good, sir. I appreciate that you said that. We all learn as we go." Blake nodded. That evening, driving home with the windows down and the warm breeze ruffling his hair, Malik reflected on the journey. He had arrived at Meridian as a newcomer, judged unfairly for the color of his skin and the unfamiliar name he carried proudly. He had persisted, proving his worth through diligence and expertise. He had turned a potential disaster into a demonstration of capability and ingenuity. And now he found himself leading and training the very people who once dismissed him. In his rearview mirror, the warehouse's tall lights receded. Ahead lay the skyline of Greenville at dusk, with the pastel clouds drifting overhead. He felt a profound sense of resolve. The road had been rocky, but he had turned adversity into opportunity. He knew that other high-potential employees, regardless of background, might face similar bias. And now, as logistics training manager and diversity council member, he had a platform to change that. He fed the gas pedal, eager for the next chapter, one where looking wrong would no longer be a measure of potential, but where competence, character, and contribution would light the path forward.